Dr David Clark.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Budget 2016 and the estimates we have examined do nothing to fix the housing crisis in New Zealand. They cut health and education expenditure further in real terms, and they see Middle New Zealand...
I'm just going to interrupt the member right now to make sure that he's aware that we've gone past the housing and health.
Certainly.
All right, well, I suggest that he begins off with a reference to the debate which is currently being held rather than the previous one.
Sir, the remainder of my first sentence will directly address the estimates hearing. Both those cuts and the fact that Middle New Zealand gets a smaller slice of the pie show that we have not got an economy that is working for New Zealanders. And that is what we examined in our estimates hearing. We looked at whether this economy is benefiting all New Zealanders. Mr Joyce told us about his Regional Economic Development Initiative. He's putting $11 million per year for the coming years into regional growth programs. That amounts to a few $100,000 for each region in New Zealand. That is not going to change the dial on an economy that is failing to deliver for most New Zealanders. Unfortunately, as we began the hearing, Mr Joyce was able to give us absolutely no confidence that his target of 40% of exports, of GDP being made up of exports would be reached in the foreseeable future. He would give us no commitment to any intermediate targets and described it as an aspirational goal. When Mr Joyce announced that plan originally, he said we would get there. He believed that we would achieve a case year by year, we would see exports as a percentage of GDP grow. But in fact, we are now down below 30%, and we are solidly below 30% and projected to stay there for some time to come. Mr Joyce and his government have failed to grow the economy. And what we looked at when we looked at the estimates were the initiatives of the government to change that situation. We looked to see if they would create an education system that would benefit New Zealand in terms of the skills it needs to grow the economy. We looked whether they would make a health system that would make sure every New Zealander was productive. We looked to see if these regional economic development initiatives would turn the dial locally to make sure that New Zealanders had opportunity to give of their best and grow the New Zealand economy. And we got no reassurance at all. And in fact, we know that since National took office, the share of the economy going to wage and salary earners has fallen. In real terms, that amounted to a $50 cut for families each week in terms of their income. And budget forecasts show that that trend is set to continue. Unemployment has grown under this government. It is higher and projected to stay higher than when the government took office, Mr Speaker. In the regional growth plans that we saw, that we're going to allocate a few $100,000 per region, and that we're not going to grow the economy in a way that's really going to change the picture we've got now of an economy that is driven by immigration largely rather than by productivity gains, and in a situation where now $37 out of every 100 that the economy grows goes to wages and the rest goes elsewhere, where it used to be 50%, we took no confidence. And if we look through regional New Zealand, we will see that everywhere and across New Zealand, this government is failing the regions. And let's not forget that if the regions succeed, New Zealand succeeds. 60% of New Zealand lives in the regions that Mr Joyce's initiative wants to support. It is just not enough. And there is not the framework there to help change the dial on New Zealand's earnings. But if we want New Zealand to succeed, we need our regions to succeed, Mr Speaker. And Mr Speaker, if we look across a series of regions, the Bay of Plenty, the number of people on benefits has increased by 13% under this government. Transport spending in that region has been cut by 40%, $86 million in real terms, Mr Speaker. Against a few $100,000 in that budget, that is nothing. That few $100,000 is not going to make up for $86 million in underinvestment in infrastructure, Mr Speaker. Gisborne, unemployment rate, equal highest in the country at 8.4%. 18% of working age people in Gisborne are on benefits, the highest level in the country. And there again, transport spending cut 22 million, a few hundred thousand on that regional development initiative, Mr Speaker, will make very little difference indeed. Mr Speaker,
Dr. David Clark.
Mr Speaker, the lowest home ownership rate in the country in Gisborne also, and police statistics going off the chart, which undermine confidence, which undermine that growth in the regional economy. Likewise in the Hawke's Bay, a very similar story. In the Manawatu, under national joblessness doubled, while incomes have fallen to the lowest in the country. Again, the economy is not working for those people in the regions. These initiatives, these few hundred thousand, will not make a difference when in that region they get just $492 of transport funding per person compared to a national average of $700. And those are NZTA figures that the Minister can look up if he cares to. National has underfunded services in the top of the South Island too. We see there burglaries on the increase. We see net jobs down by 200 in the past year. And we see cuts to the DHB, which supports the workforce. And Mr Speaker, there again, we see police statistics. Burglaries up 49%. Police assaults up 44%, assaults recorded by the police in the past year alone. The economy is not working for the regions, Mr Speaker. National has underfunded these things in Northland as well. And there the economy has shrunk by 1.8% in the March quarter alone. Northland's unemployment rate of 8.4%, again the equal highest in the country. They've lost a net 100 jobs in the past year, and the median household income has fallen by $37 a week, Mr Speaker. This initiative that the government is promoting to grow the regions is not going to change the dial on that. And I am interested to hear the Minister speak further because he failed to convince in the estimates hearing on that. In my hometown of Otago, the number of jobs fell across the region by 2,500 in the past year. Household incomes fell by $98 a week, according to the New Zealand Income Survey. And they've cut over $100 million from the DHB over that period. If you fail to invest in infrastructure in the regions, we cannot expect a few hundred thousand here and there to make a difference, Mr Joyce. National have failed, of course, the Southland economy as well as we know. It's shrunk 10% in the past year, 10%, and incomes in Southland fell by $49 a week, the average household income in the past year, and unemployment has more than doubled in Southland, more than doubled since 2008 when National came to office. And of course, the cuts to health have impacted there too, Mr Speaker. Taranaki is in recession. Its economy shrank by 3.3% in 2015 and already a further 1.8% in the first quarter of this year. They lost 700 jobs in Taranaki last year. The Minister smiles, but these figures are hurting people in the regions. They are hurting people in the regions, and the failure to invest this few $100,000 that the Minister has trumpeted in his budget, in his regional development program, is not going to change the dial in the Taranaki, nor will it in the Waikato, Mr Speaker. And there we have another situation where the economy has shrunk by 2.2% in the last year and a further 0.3% in the first quarter of this year. And these are the Minister's own statistics through Stats New Zealand. Of course, Mr Speaker, the 900 jobs lost in the Waikato region are not lost on the locals either in the past year. Wairarapa, Mr Speaker, West Coast, I could go on. These places desperately need regional development programs. The estimates ought to be the place where we look to see the investment of the government in those regions, recognising that if the regions don't succeed, New Zealand will not succeed. We cannot afford a two-speed economy in this country, Mr Speaker. We need a government with vision, not a government that's been in office for 8 years and is content to see wages decline in real terms in these regions, not a government that is out of ideas, out of touch, and described as arrogant increasingly by the people that I talk to, Mr Speaker. We need a Labour government with an aspiration for the future, backing the Kiwi dream, addressing the housing crisis, investing in the regions, and making sure that real New Zealand, that middle New Zealand, is benefiting from any gains in the economy that are over and above an economy driven purely by immigration.
The Honourable Stephen